We write basically developer tooling that enables developers to bake crypto into their applications directly. Specifically, we write user onboarding and wallet infrastructure sort of code so that you can give an on-chain account a wallet to anybody using your product, no matter whether your product is built for a very crypto native audience or for a mainstream audience. And so that means we get to work with a range of customers as wide as proof of play in gaming. That is, I think, doing some of the highest TPS on Arbitrum through their games. It means working with the team at Hyperliquid or the teams at Jupiter or Pump Fun on trading applications. It means working with Blackbird in building out a restaurant payment system. And obviously the team at Farcaster on their in-app wallets. But basically it is, if you're trying to give your users access to digital assets in a way that lives within your app whilst keeping them in control, Privy writes the infrastructure that helps you do that.
I think we actually did meet in person briefly. I can't remember where it was. Was it FarCon?
I think it was at FarCon. It was in LA.
Yeah, very cool. So yeah, I'm glad we had the chance to set this up. This pod, ZEROPOD, I've been doing for almost 2 years now. And basically the goal is just to shine a light and learn more about some of the best builders in the Ethereum ecosystem. So that's why you're here.
I am very grateful to be here.
Awesome. So one thing that I do like to do a little differently on ZEROPOD from most tech pods is I like to sort of spend a few minutes up front and get to know the person that we're chatting with a little bit, the backstory, the origin story, before we get into the project that you're working on, in this case, Privy, of course. But yeah, I would love to hear a little bit about the Henri sort of backstory.
I'm French originally, grew up in Paris.
I almost called you Henri, but I didn't want to have a repeat of Mike Desmarais. When I had Mike on from Rainbow, I was like, "Hey, so is it Desmarais?" And he's like, "Bro, like, no." But my ancestors in Montreal would love it when you say it like that.
That's what I thought. I assume he's Canadian.
He is Canadian, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, he's got some connections up there. But I'm Canadian, and so when I see a French name, I always default to the French pronunciation. But I've been clowned many times with like the American versions of these French names. So I wasn't sure.
I wouldn't have guessed that Toady Hawk was a Canadian name.
Yeah, I know. It's Toady Hawk. That's why. No.
Yeah, so no, I grew up in France probably till I was a teenager and basically moved to the US. The goal for my parents was to get us to speak English because we didn't speak, or at least I didn't speak English.
Okay.
And it seemed like a useful skill in the modern world. And both were lucky enough to have jobs that allowed them to move. So we moved to New York
Nice.
for what was going to be, a year. And ended up being the last, call it 20 years of my life. So I've been in the U.S. at this point.
Many such cases.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's funny because it's sort of done two things. On the one side, I'm clearly very Americanized in a lot of ways, professionally being one of them in the way I think about work and a lot of what's shaped me, including in tech. But then I think living as a teenager far from home, kind of also crystallizes a lot of things that feel very special about the place you're from. And so I have this I feel I'm a foreigner in all lands. I feel very, very French in the U.S.
How old were you again when you came over?
I missed that.
How old were you when you came over again?
I was 12 or so.
Yeah, so that's a tough time because you've got a lot of friends, and I moved around a lot when I was younger too. But luckily, the youngest. Like the last time we moved, I was pretty young, like second grade or something. So not so bad, but I feel like when you move older, it's tougher.
Yeah, I mean, it was honestly it was pretty good. I remember it being tough at first, but New York's an easy well, is an intense city, but is an easy city to move to. There's a lot of things to do, and it was a lot of fun growing up here.
Cool. So you came to New York, and then what was next after that? When it came time to think about post-secondary, I know you ended up at Stanford. How did that happen?
Yeah, so the French have I think a very good sort of extraordinarily rigorous system, and it's interesting because at least I grew up kind of knowing what I wanted to do within the French system. You have to do sort of a prep school for a couple of years post secondary. So 2 years, and you're basically prepping for an exam. Then you've got the entrance exam to like a type of school, and based on how you do on that single exam, you kind of end up in whatever university you're going to go to. I remember very much, I was at the time I'd gotten to Stanford. I thought I wanted to go to this prep school in France, and was looking at like, application dues, and the all in yearly cost for that prep school was, I think, about 300 euros, and it was optional, which is to say you had to pay 300 euros if you could afford it. But these are all like state schools. They're very good. The one thing is that they kind of have you pick between sort of maths and literary paths very early on. So you either do basically all math, physics, etc., or you take literary courses. And I didn't know which I wanted to do. And so that kind of, made me think, what, U.S. colleges are a great place to go because you don't have to choose. You get to pick while you're there. So I ended up there. I started my undergrad at Stanford. I finished, as it were, at Columbia, and got into computer science, frankly, probably because it was a less popular thing to do at Columbia. It was a very small department as compared to Stanford's, which was, I think, the biggest major at the time, and probably still is. I mean, no doubt still is. And so got into CS pretty late in my schooling, but thought, man, this is an incredible field because every other, and sorry, I can go as deep as you want talking about myself.
Keep going. Yeah, I love it.
Great pleasure. But I feel like every other field, you could kind of coast or get by. Making things up is not quite right, but like embellishing and having some amount of creative BS. And there's an honesty and an earnestness to CS that I hadn't found anywhere else, where if, at least at that stage, you try and write some software and it doesn't work, it's your fault. The compiler isn't wrong, you're wrong. And
you can't BS the compiler, yeah.
It's because you haven't understood the rules of the game yet. And so there was an honesty where it felt like, oh man, this is a real test. And again, I think since then, as you go deeper, then you start working on things where the compiler isn't as normative. But that felt like very reassuring to me. And so I really very quickly got into computer science. And from there, and by the way, sorry, slight tangent. This is maybe the thing that like low grade scares me about AI, is we're moving into like non-deterministic.
I was just thinking
writing.
that. I was like thinking how much more creative that field has become now.
Exactly. And so now programming is much more literary than it used to be, and it's much more non-deterministic. So that part of CS maybe is going away. But coming out of college, I basically had a job lined up, and a friend of mine said, why don't we try and work on something together for a little while? If people want to use it, great. Otherwise, we'll go and earn a living the regular way. And so we started a project together. Ended up getting into YC. This was building an application. That
was Shout, or was that before Shout?
Yeah, it was called Shout, exactly. And it was a sort of a peer-to-peer marketplace application. I think it's like one of those very bad good ideas from like Peter Thiel, like the class that seems amazing, and then you realize that everybody's tried it and it's always failed, and maybe there are good reasons for it. But the thought at the time, this is a very like circa 2014 idea, was you have this mobile phone. It means sort of ubiquity of data. You have geolocation and everything else, and it means you can have much more ephemeral trading and transactions occur for marketplaces that could otherwise not be. You can meet someone in real time at a given place and have the opportunity to transact with them, exchange goods or services in a way that wasn't possible before you had this market maker on your pocket. And so the very lofty idea was we can attack a lot of the deadweight loss that exists everywhere around us by creating more market opportunities for people. The harsh reality that actually converted into is the places where we found product market fit was really around people scalping restaurant reservations and like theater tickets and so on and so forth. So it was a really amazing adventure. Going through YC was completely life-changing. And frankly, raising capital, having people take us seriously and push us to try things, to take risks, which is very much not a French mindset. I mean, the French call venture capital risk capital. And so the relationship to failure.
I mean, they're not wrong, but it's true.
Yeah. And so that was a very, very formative experience. And I came out of that failed startup and felt like my relationship to CS was still budding. And so I ended up going to grad school back at Stanford, where I got into computer security. And that's kind of how I found my way into crypto.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I think with the shout thing, it's interesting because sometimes you can just be too early for things as well. Like, I don't know if you feel like that's the case there, or do you think do you think some of the assumptions were wrong altogether, or is it just that?
So
Yeah,
this is going to be a major stretch of an analogy, but I'm trying to get back to topic with seeing your nouns goggles staring at me in the background.
sure,
Um,
yeah,
I think it's a bad idea in part because it's such a broad, ambitious idea, and I think the best parts and the worst parts of Ethereum share the same trait, which is to say, um, it comes from such a place of building the world computer and trying to solve deep existential generalizable problems. And obviously the problem of any abstraction is the broader you try and make it, the more future proof you try and make it, the less good it becomes at solving any given thing. And so that balance is everything. And I
it's like
think
a
trying to build
jack of all trades, master of none, that kind of thing.
yeah, and I think trying to build hyperlocal marketplaces, the core issue is you end up having to optimize for one vertical, and you're kind of a slave to which vertical you end up selecting first, or ends up selecting you first. And any marketplace just needs real like density in order for market making to work. In order for supply and demand to meet, and for there to be a good consumer experience on the other side of it, you need a liquid enough market, and that just means um, uh, to me, I think the trap is you end up having a lot of verticalized marketplaces, like, uh, and you can kind of name them, obviously the Ubers and Airbnbs and so on, but there's a number of like very vertical marketplaces that have taken off and really succeeded, but fully horizontalized marketplaces where anybody can define things ends up being both a data modeling problem. Like, how do you define, like, let's say I want to do a used shoe marketplace, like, I probably want to have data around like shoe size, how worn it is, et cetera, et cetera. So it ends up being very data specific. So you can create opportunities for demand and supply to meet. And that doesn't generalize particularly well. So it's a very interesting problem, but it's an extraordinarily hard problem to build good experiences around. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't say we were too early. I just think it's a very, very hard idea, actually.
Hmm. Yeah, and to your point, I think if you are very generalized, it sort of gives someone else the impetus to then focus down. And so you mentioned how scalpers decided that they were going to make that the vertical, and so you didn't get to choose your vertical because I don't think you would have chosen scalping tickets as your vertical from the outset, right?
No, and there were a lot of things we were excited about it by, meaning the actual subject matter is one thing, but the reality is it's like clearly very real time. You've kind of got this exploding offer concept because the tickets become more valuable up to some point right before the show, at which
Right.
point they become far less valuable because the show started. And
Mm,
so for us, we were like, this is like, level 5 difficulty. If we can solve this one problem, if we can make real-time marketplace transactions work for
yeah,
something that is as time sensitive and location sensitive as tickets, then we've solved it
true.
for everything.
That's
Uh,
true.
and so we actually dug deep once we saw this behavior take off in the marketplace. But again, it's really hard once you start to specialize to then go back out and generalize again.
Yeah, fair enough.
It was interesting because the thing that was really taking off at the time was Facebook marketplaces. And that's where we saw a lot of
Yeah,
impromptu commerce taking off. And we were like, man, this is so general. And I
yeah.
think this is part of the reason why Craigslist has kept working, obviously. So lots of thoughts there. It was a very
My
interesting few
my
years.
wife keeps Facebook Marketplace in business, so she's the main reason they're still around.
She's the core audience we were trying to target at the time.
Well, you walked us down the garden path a little bit there. You were telling us about when you went to grad school and then you discovered crypto, and that was actually my next question, just to ask sort of how you fell down the, the ubiquitous rabbit hole and how you ended up, on chain.
Yeah, it really came from one professor, if I'm completely honest. There's this guy at Stanford called Dan Bonnet. He is a really extraordinary cryptographer and teacher. And I feel like you have people who are incredible researchers and you have people who are incredible teachers. And he happens to be both. He had this line that I loved. I don't know if it's a line, but at least it's something he would say at certain intervals in his classes, which is something along the lines of, by the way, we've got some pretty important questions in like computer science. For example, is P equal NP? Please give it some thought and come back to me if you get any ideas, and we'll write papers this way. And it was very
Okay.
genuine because obviously it's a bit of a joke because this is a like seminal problem, but also my understanding is he had this doctoral student before, but
Okay.
who wrote some of the like very core papers on fully homomorphic encryption. And I think it started off through conversations like this around things. This was somebody who was a lawyer before he became a cryptographer, had a very, not Dan Bonnet, the student I'm thinking about, Craig Gentry.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I think Dan Bonnet was just a really inspiring professor to have. And he taught a few courses. One of them was Intro to Cryptocurrencies, I think is what it was called. It was like CS251. And so I took this course, really just wanted to take another of his class after taking like a few cryptography courses and computer security courses with him. And it was very fun because it felt like applied cryptography. So, one of the assignments that we had was build an ETH miner that is fully rational and doesn't completely adhere to protocol, but like does certain things. This is back in proof of work days. And so just there was a lot there to pull on. And that's kind of how I got into crypto. And then the second sort of big part of that was I was very good friends with this fellow called Juan Benet, who had started a company called Protocol Labs. And I was in YC with Juan. I was in undergrad with Juan, and then I lived with him during grad school. And so I just saw a lot of the Protocol Labs people working, and I saw the stuff they were working on, and it was fascinating. And so I came out thinking I was either getting a PhD or doing research in crypto was an extraordinarily interesting place to be. So that's kind of how I ended up joining PL and ultimately diving deep. And it took about a year, frankly, moving from being interested in distributed systems and cryptographic research to actually getting into getting red pilled, I guess, by this idea of we have, internet state that any two applications can coordinate around, and seeing crypto as the coordination layer for the web sort of came a little bit later and was very powerful, but it's not where I started.
So what did you work on in your time at Protocol Labs?
I worked on a lot of Filecoin things. So I worked for the better part of my time there on the consensus algorithm for Filecoin. And so getting very, very deep into at the time, a lot of what was like, distributed consensus research. And it was very fun because it was a field that was coming together, really a paper at a time for the entire duration of my work on it. But
is
it was,
Filecoin its own blockchain? I forget. It is its own blockchain.
It's
right?
its own blockchain. Yeah. We ended up using the system called DRAND, which is a randomness beacon to sample randomness from in order to do leader election and understand who could produce blocks and reap sort of block rewards. But the way to think about it is there were really sort of two research teams. One was doing a lot of the ZK stuff related to proving you are storing files. So we call this proof of space-time, and this is how do you actually show that you are storing files on a hard drive in the way that you're saying you are, and that these are the right files that you're storing. Very complex, very interesting problem at the time, and I don't know if this is still true, by far the largest ZK circuit that had been put into production anywhere. And then the other side is obviously how do you then build these proofs into a state machine that is sort of self-perpetuating and unhackable. And that's where obviously the distributed consensus research comes in, which is how do you build basically an economic system around this via consensus that enables sort of state updates and rewards people for doing the work in doing so. And so the high level way in which it works is you can imagine you have a power table that is basically, it ranks all of the miners who are storing files on other people's behalf. Based on the amount of space that they've committed to the network, they have a probability of becoming leaders in the next round and getting to write the next block. And obviously that comes with a reward. And so you're incentivized to contribute storage to the network. This is the supply side of the two-sided marketplace. Because you are likely to earn rewards for doing so via sort of block minting. And then also you get paid fees by people who are asking you to actually store their files. So very, very interesting problem. And I worked on that for a few years. I worked on a lot of the specs to translate sort of Filecoin research into then sort of, engineering ready materials that we could build against to build the early clients for the protocol.
That model always struck me as like the blockchain version of like LimeWire. I'm from the LimeWire generation. I don't know if you are, but that always sounded exciting to me because, that was a big part of definitely my childhood, my teenage years was, trying to avoid the viruses and download songs on LimeWire and Napster and all those places.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I think there was a lot of it that drew from peer-to-peer inspiration. Obviously IPFS is a huge part of Protocol Labs and the inspiration there. And it was also fascinating to see an organization that thought about open source in such a deep way where, all of it was built on a stack that was completely open from libp2p, which was the sort of peer-to-peer networking library that had been built to serve IPFS, I think serves parts of the EVM today. So it's just very interesting to see all of that working together, and it taught me a lot. Obviously, both about crypto itself and how these systems are built from the ground up, but also about open source work, which was really fascinating.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sort of telling us a little bit about your story and how you ended up at Privy, but let's get into the meat of Privy. I'd love to hear where the idea came from to found Privy and sort of tell us that story.
Yeah, so the coming out of Protocol Labs, I was deeply in love and a little bit forlorn with crypto. I felt like, and this is something I say a lot, but I just it strikes me as being so true to my bones, which is we have created probably the single most important thing, the internet, since like agriculture. So give or take 10,000 years, this is probably the most meaningful thing we've done as a species by creating an information system that is broadly resilient and accessible to anyone with a range of different connection types. And yet we are dumping so much user data and so much value onto it, even though it was never designed for it. And here is this ability to create these decentralized trustless systems, or at least trust minimized, I might say, systems that enable broad coordination and exchange of data and value in open ways. So that was the falling in love part, is just kind of having that brain worm sort of sink its teeth into me, and starting to think about all the ways in which this could be broadly useful for humanity. I think the forlorn part was just feeling like there weren't that many applications to go around that I genuinely wanted to use in crypto.
Or tell other people to use.
Yeah. And so exactly, I was having conversations with family, with friends who weren't in crypto. They'd like kind of squint their eyes and be like, "Oh, that sounds interesting."
Yeah, and they still do that, 10 years later.
But I have as much hope as I've ever had for where we're going. But broadly, I was like, man, this tech is so powerful, and also it is for the most part useless. And unfortunately, I don't see that changing because we are so in love with these complex primitives, and really the philosophical ramifications of their adoption, that we're absolutely not focused on the adoption itself. And so no one is building, it felt to me in my dark days, no one is building for users and no one is building for products. And there are really two constituencies. We're building tech for tech's sake, and this is the academic constituency of which I'm part. And we are building really an easy way to make a buck, usually off of retail's vehicles. Back. And so I kind of got to this nihilistic place, left crypto, frankly. When we launched Filecoin, I was like, this is an amazing adventure in my life, but I need to work on something a little bit more grounded in real world impact. And spent a lot of time looking at data privacy in fintech and in healthcare, and data tokenization specifically. How do we enable secure storage of user data in a way that lets services online make more responsible use of data to build better products? And obviously, the first place I thought this was useful was crypto, because the two problems are meeting. And it was, I know you not as Toady Hawk, but as OX 123 on the blockchain. There was this very famous tweet at the time from somebody working on MakerDAO, who I think it was Runekek, who, I think that's right. At this point, I don't trust myself with names and attributions anymore, so check your facts. But who was like, does anybody know who OX whatever is? Unless he tops up his wallet in the next little while, he's going to lose $700 million.
Holy shit.
And I was like, this is jarring. Like, we invented email, 30, 40 years ago.
And we can't contact anybody on the blockchain.
That one of the most important things in his life is happening right now because he's not checking the blockchain. And it speaks to the fact that like crypto systems and crypto applications themselves were like basically pull only. You never got pushed as a user. You only ever had to pull. So you had to come back after your transaction is settled. These were the days where, by the way, early Uniswap, you would make a transaction, you have to come back 10 minutes later to see it settle. And
by the way, I do appreciate you giving me the heads up on that $700 million liquidation. That really would have been tough. Thanks. Thanks for the heads up.
And so that's kind of how the idea came together. Was can we make it so people are building for users, not for wallets? And can we kind of bring the human back to the blockchain transaction? Can we basically create a safe way for folks to associate real world data to wallets themselves? And sort of pulling on that thread very quickly we found that we built a system which was more or less a privacy preserving Redis, a key value store, that we were working with crypto developers building applications to help them, associate emails and socials and phone numbers and sometimes private keys in what was a very early attempt at poor man's account abstraction to addresses. And very quickly we kind of squinted and we were like, man, the problem area is right. The problem shape is wrong. And the actual thing that we're fixing, unbeknownst to us, is onboarding and is key management. And so a lot of the systems that we built were actually very easy to then focus in on what if we verticalize. So going back from this like very horizontal problem shape to a very vertical problem shape, what if we verticalize? And we actually focus on making it easier to onboard anyone, no matter how much or little they know about crypto, no matter whether they already have a wallet or 15, or whether they never heard of what a wallet is and don't know and don't care. And so that ended up becoming the Privy that we're working on today, which is really a system that enables you to bring someone on and associate an email, a social, a phone number, a passkey to an account. And whether that person is coming in with a wallet or 15, or whether they need you to help orchestrate wallet generation and a self-custodial wallet for them, we help shape this. And so that's what Privy does today. We build a very simple onboarding and user management tooling for developers working in crypto.
And this whole sort of tool set that you're creating, this is all around the concept of account abstraction for anyone who's listening and maybe has heard that term a lot. This is basically what you're talking about in a way. It's like...
Yes and no. I'll disambiguate in that. Yes.
Yeah, please do.
Broadly, it is about abstracting crypto accounts and making them really embeddable. Like I think we're very annoyingly nuanced, and I think that is maybe our contribution to the space. Is I find that this space can sometimes be a little too paternalistic with users and with developers. This is the one right way to build, and if you are not building this way, then you're a heathen. And I think we kind of understand that security is paramount, and you need to set a floor for what a secure interaction is. But I think beyond that, users and applications come in all shapes and sizes. And if you're about to use a game for the first time, or if you're about to use a banking product for the first time, your experience is likely not to be the same. And frankly, within an application itself, this was an early lesson serving folks like FriendTech. You come into a product for the first time, you have $0 to your name, you don't know what this product is. Your sort of friction minimization path to convert you and get you moving into the platform is very different than by your 100th login, where you've got thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in your account. Yeah. And so this idea of building modular systems that can sort of progressively not only onboard, but secure user accounts. This is the idea of wallets being modular rather than monolithic. The reason I'm backing away is I see all of that as account abstraction. With that said, I think account abstraction has become a bit of a reserved keyword, especially in Ethereum land, where usually by that people mean 4337 and now 7702, and a very specific technical piece, which is splitting away the private key management for account controls from the notion of the account itself. And so I would say we broadly work on how do we abstract crypto so that developers have a little bit more room to express their craft through the products that they build, even if those products are built on crypto rails. We also do work with very specifically 4337 and 7702 as account abstraction tooling. But I would say those are two different senses.
Yeah, I can see the distinction there. I guess as a non-technical user of these things, I've always just thought of account abstraction as sort of like tech that abstracts away the complexity of logging in and using a wallet and all these things that, normal people don't know anything about when they're coming to use an app like FriendTech or many of the other apps that are implemented via Privy. Yeah.
Then I think broadly that's a very good definition for Privy.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the core values for Privy. I was doing a bit of reading on your paragraph, and you talked a little bit about 4 core values. Can you talk a little bit about those? I know you list them as driving impact by usage, committing to the experiment, focusing, and being an owner. Can you sort of touch on each of those and why you think they're important for you guys as a company?
Yeah, we do a terrible job generally of writing about ourselves. I think we see ourselves as being, just frankly in service of the applications that use us, the developers and the products that they build. And so the point is, like, I think infra, maybe this is slight reaction to crypto, and crypto's focus on infra generally should be in the background. But yet I think we have some cool stuff internally. And so, yeah, these values is kind of something we wrote with Asta, my co-founder, early on, being like, I think they're bad values. Bad values is like, be nice, or do good work, or work hard.
Don't be evil.
Sorry?
Don't be evil. Google's famous
Don't
film.
be evil might be. Yeah, I have more thoughts there, but I think bad values are values that are completely that have no meat to them, that are hard to disagree with. I think a value is a sacrifice. A value is a trade-off that you make. A value is something that you're choosing to do, not doing an alternative that is also very good. And I think basically culture and identity within an organization, within a company, means deciding this is important to us. And that means that this other thing is not, or at least is not as important. And so,
Yeah, you can't focus and you can't generalize at the same time, right?
exactly. Like rebuild, focus to some extent. So we wrote these 4 values, and focus, for example, is the part of it that I like is scope, speed, quality. We pick 2. We always cut scope. We prefer to do fewer things well. And so, to a question, for example, on 4337, taking that as an example, early on, we were like, what do we do with this construct? Should we be building smart account systems to go alongside these wallet abstractions that we've built? And the answer was no, we can't, because we are good at one thing, and we are good at basically giving meat space bodies, so to speak, access to secure private keys. We take care of the translation from your physical self to basically your cryptographic self. But the extra step of writing the smart contracts and the solidity code that allows you to then have an on-chain account, that is probably better for someone else to take. They'll be better at it for us, and we should be integrating the best of what's out there. But I think focus means that we do way less. We're not a one-stop shop. We don't get you everything, but the things that we do are going to be hopefully the best of what's out there. And so picking the right problems becomes really important. But this is, so those were the 4 values that we wrote with Asta very early on when we were starting the company, being like, okay, what are we for? Conversely, what are we against? And the one I like is be an owner. It's I give real feedback. I'm always kind, but not necessarily nice. I act with conviction, even when that means forgoing consensus. And I remember very well when we were writing that one, we had fallen into a place where we were a small team at the time. We were like 5 or 6 people, and for any important technical decision, we ended up calling the entire team into a room and debating it. And we were like, oh man, like this will not scale. And in fact, like we are all looking for consensus. It feels like we're afraid of being wrong. And if we're wrong, at least being wrong in a way that everybody agreed with feels safer. And that is a disease that we have to stamp out very early on.
Yeah.
And so
too many cooks.
I think some of these values we do well on, some of them we don't, but they all still feel very right in terms of this is what we're trying to live up to and how we do work on a day-to-day basis.
I love it. So what does that mean exactly for people who maybe aren't 100% familiar with what Privy does? Can you sort of give us the elevator pitch? What does Privy do?
Yeah, so we write basically developer tooling that enables developers to bake crypto into their applications directly. Specifically, we write user onboarding and wallet infrastructure sort of code so that you can give an on-chain account, a wallet, to anybody using your product, no matter whether your product is built for a very crypto native audience or for a mainstream audience. And so that means we get to work with a range of customers as wide as proof of play in gaming. That is, I think, doing some of the highest TPS on Arbitrum through their games. It means working with the team at Hyperliquid or the teams at Jupiter or Pump Fun on trading applications. It means working with Blackbird in building out a restaurant payment system.
Nice.
And obviously the team at Farcaster on their in-app wallets. But basically it is, if you're trying to give your users access to digital assets in a way that lives within your app whilst keeping them in control, Privy writes the infrastructure that helps you do that.
Amazing. One question I had for you was one that I've had myself as well about it, sort of on the topic of wallet abstraction and maybe wallet bifurcation, is do you see like in the future a problem where people have too many wallets in a way? Like, if you're logging into a new wallet almost everywhere you go, how do we sort of reconstitute all that so that we don't get, a worse state of bifurcation of all these assets across millions of wallets?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do. And I don't think it's in the future. I think it's in the present. And I think it's a very hard question, obviously. I guess I have 3 points. First, fragmentation is not a new problem. It is a problem that has worsened and that embedded wallets do not help with, or in fact hurt actively. But it is not a new problem. And fragmentation, Wallet Connect was a revolutionary tool because what you ended up having is wallet client fragmentation in a way that forced developers to integrate so many wallet clients that they kind of got lost. And so you were leaving part of the market behind if you didn't integrate it. Wallet Connect fixed that issue. But the reality is that you still already have multiple accounts across these wallets. The sort of likewise kind of false meme was like, well, account abstraction fixes this. It really doesn't. Pick your AA implementation. I can use kernel. Even if you and I both build applications built on kernel, which is a smart account implementation, a user signing in will end up with 2 smart accounts. So it's kind of turtles all the way down. And I think part of the core tension is any abstraction creates disintermediation between the user and their account. As soon as you create an abstraction for the user, you are creating room for them to split and fragment their identity across surfaces.
So it's like a trade-off in that sense.
There's a trade-off, exactly. And the advantage, obviously, of a MetaMask is that the user is the one picking when to fragment. I get to click the button to create a new account. Whereas with embedded wallets, the developer is orchestrating the wallet on the user's behalf. And so there's less control. And so the spectrum, the line that we have to walk is between user control and developer control to some extent. Compelling products, which I believe developers need to have some control over, and great user controls, which does create product friction. And the far extremes would be a user should have a single account all over the web. And the implications of that from a security and UX perspective is basically, in my opinion, MetaMask and Phantom. They've done a really good fucking job. And they are the logical conclusion of what unified accounts look like on the web. I think there is room, especially if we want to onboard, the next billion people per the meme. There is room for other points in the trade-off spectrum for viable self-custodial composable solutions that are not on the full end of I'm going to have a screen pop up in the middle of the experience and hijack the experience for the developer. So what I mean to say is, I think, to me, there is no world in which users have a single identity globally. And I've said this before. I think, how I interact with my bank, how I interact with my grocer, how I interact with my porn site are going to be 3 very different experiences. And I do not want to share this data amongst them. But from even a privacy perspective, it's an anti-pattern for me, the thing that we would have global identity.
It would make it awkward to buy eggplants from the grocer.
That definitely would be, that's a very vivid take on that exact topic. I like it. So yes, not great. With that said, I think the user should be the one controlling how their identities are split, what profiles is. I think privacy means something different to everyone. Some people have a life on Instagram that is truer, and I don't mean to say this in a disparaging way, but that actually is their personal life in a very fundamental way. Other people aren't on Instagram or have separations. And I think just you look at humanity, and there's no world in which this is a one-size-fits-all solution. I think, and I don't mean to wash our hands of this, I think our job is to give users and developers more solutions. We launched on day one with wallet connectors because we felt embedded wallets won't be right for anybody. Why the fuck would you give me an embedded wallet if I already have a MetaMask? But also, the developer should be able to choose, this is what's best for my experience. From there, it is our responsibility, in my opinion, to give users a way to manage their identities and sort of fix the fragmentation. But I guess what I'm saying is I think this is going to be an eternal tension. I don't think there is a silver bullet to make it go away. And if there is, then you're going to leave some users behind, either the ones that are privacy conscious or the ones that are unification hungry. I do think there's 100 ways in which we can continue to make this better. And I'm very excited for that never-ending quest because it's exactly why we got into this business.
To that point, I was just going to say too, like, I think the idea of a wallet also, maybe that concept has changed a bit too. And there's a lot of wallet concepts that don't really require moneyness either. Like, a lot of Privy applications might just be, like you said, for gaming. So they're like a way to log on and prove your identity or prove something else about you, but they don't necessarily have that financial component. And in that case, like, it's not really fragmenting your money
and
either.
Completely agreed. And I think that there's an early slide I actually really like that I made, which is a weird, very self-serving thing to say. But you kind of have, you have a spectrum of you have this band of what's technically possible today, and you have trade-offs, you have limits in what you can do. And I think what we're seeing is there are different viable product paths within the trade-offs space. But as we continue to build and as technology expands, and this is to me a core role that Ethereum is playing in the market, but as like even ZKPs get better, then the actual bands of the trade-off continue to loosen, and we can do more with less, or at least we have more tooling to do more with more. And I guess what I'm saying is, in part, this is going to be an eternal tension because the solution space is getting better and better every day. And I think, again, ZKPs are an extraordinarily exciting piece there. It just takes time. And I think the thing that we will fight with all of our might is some version of stasis of, if it ain't perfect, we won't build it, because that is why you never end up with compelling products and applications. If we don't make decentralized systems happen today, they will not happen. I don't believe there's inevitability to this stuff.
Not a given, yeah.
And so we have to be very pragmatic about how hard we push on creating a reason why people will want to use this before this space loses its societal welcome.
Forgive me if this exists already, but is it something that Privy is working on to have a way to sort of reconstitute all your many different wallets via the way that you're using to link them? Like, for example, your email or whatever you're using in place of a wallet. Is there a way, like down the future or now even, I'm not sure if this exists, to sort of say, this is my email, Toady Hawk at Gmail. These are all the wallets you've created?
This doesn't exist today. It's something we've given so much thought to and want to build, but want to build right. I think, again, we're not a consumer application itself. With that said, I think we have a responsibility to helping users the way maybe system preferences help users.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's something we're pretty actively working on.
Cool. I'd love to hear, or I'm sure our listeners would love to hear a little bit about some of the protocols and projects that you've worked alongside, because Privy is the kind of infra that many people listening have probably used and maybe they don't even know it. So I'd love to hear a little bit about some of your partnerships. I know the first time you came across my radar was when you partnered with Friendtech. That was a big moment. So maybe you could talk about that and then some of the other meaningful partnerships you've had since.
Yeah, I mean, Friendtech to us was an extraordinarily exciting time with very talented builders. We frankly had no idea what they were working on. We just knew that they understood their users in a way that very few developers do. And so talking to the team there, we were just really impressed with how thoughtful they were around UX. And we were like, oh man, these are builders we have to stick very close to because they will make us so much better by pushing the infrastructure. And I think that's kind of been the story of what feels to me so exciting about Privy and the work that we do, is we get to work across a lot of different verticals. And I think each one makes the next better. For example, working in gaming, we came up with the notion of you have to have headless signing. It's a very complex question that has a lot of implications on user consent. But if you're
what does that mean, sorry?
Not popping up a transaction modal in order to perform the transaction in app. And specifically, if you're playing a game of, call it Dota, and it's on chain, and every time you're trying to take a move, you get a fucking prompt to sign something. It is an unplayable game. Yeah. And that unlocked better trading experiences. So, I talked about Pirate Nation and proof of play in gaming. This is, apps like, there's a huge number of them. Moving into trading, now that you have headless signing, you could do faster trade execution. But now latency becomes something that we have to work on. I think Privy, through a number of just optimizations that we do, has, if you do key reconstitution on device, it's sub 40 millisecond latency. If you do it in a TE, we try to make sure that it's sub 100 milliseconds globally. It takes a lot of work, but very low latency. Working with, trading products like Pump, like DOIDX, like Hyperliquid.
You guys work with Banker as well, I think, right?
With Banker, exactly. But then, for example, agentic use cases. So we work with, the likes of Virtuals and Bankers and Griffin. These are all applications that want to have an agent potentially take actions on behalf of the user. And this is a question of, what if the LLM hallucinates? Like, are you potentially wrecking your user? So we had to build policies to ensure that you could give basically delegated access, but with certain limited permissions to an agent to trade on your behalf, potentially.
You can only get wrecked so much.
Exactly. You limit the damage. And these permissions is exactly what banking platforms that we work with. And we work with a lot of fintechs today, payroll companies, remittances products, and so on.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
To help with risk. And so this is what we're seeing, is ultimately figuring out the right abstraction level helps us make it so that every customer makes us better in a way that can be really, really valuable to every other customer. And so we have a range of customers, from folks who are building, games. These are, hacker teams of 2-3 people building games for folks. And these are very fun experiments. One of my favorite builders in the space is Zero X Small Brain. And he's an extraordinarily thoughtful builder who's building absolutely incredible stuff. And on the other side, you've got, we're talking to public companies these days that are building basically financial systems on top of blockchain rails. And serving that widest segment really means that we've actually had to focus on product cohesion across the board. We've gotten, from a cybersecurity standpoint, obviously serving Frentech and Pump and Hyperliquid means we have to do a lot of work. And conversely, focusing on the quality of the developer experience is kind of key to anybody who touches the product. So that's a lot of what we do.
Awesome. So can we talk a little bit about sort of ongoing developments within Privy? What are you guys focused most on right now? Any alpha that you can share?
Yeah, we're working on three core things. The first is continued expansion of like core product capabilities. So building out more clients, building out more chains, making it that Privy feels idiomatic, no matter where you're coming from. If you're, call it Flutter developer and you have been all your life, you should feel like we were born in Flutter. If you are really into Bitcoin L2s and you're working, for example, on some of the products from the folks at Alpine, you should feel like we've been there alongside every step of the way. So a lot of that, which just takes a lot of craft and care to feel idiomatic in those places, is the first. The second is continued expansion of funding options. The core friction piece, the part where the user experience falls short, especially for mainstream users who are not already on chain, isn't actually funding the wallet to begin with, moving from fiat to crypto. So we're continuing to expand the options that you have there in terms of on-ramps, whether you're coming in with a credit card, whether you already have assets, and automating bridging across assets that you have, as well as like Wire ACH and a number of other solutions. So that's sort of the second key. I think the third is what you were talking about, which is trying to understand what is the right way to help the user and the developer kind of align the identity work in a way that like keeps the developer in a place where they can express their craft through the applications they build, but lets the user make sense of everything that they have across the web. And so that is kind of the third big thing. So hopefully some fun stuff there soon.
I love it. I saw in a recent tweet that you guys are working to integrate EIP 7702. You mentioned a bit earlier in the interview as well. Can you tell our listeners what this EIP is all about? It's basically it's like the linkage of sort of EOA wallets and smart contract wallets. What does that mean for the user though?
Yeah. So, I mean, historically, concretely, you had this monolith of an account, which is your private key is both the account, in a sense that the wallet address is derived from the public key. The private key controls it, and they are intrinsically tied together.
That's your MetaMask or your Rainbow or your
exactly. What early 4337 smart account abstraction stuff, this includes, for example, Coinbase Smart Wallet, does is it creates an on-chain complement to your private key, and your private key is just now one signer into the on-chain complement, but you can have multiple signers. So it creates a lot of flexibility. You're not as tied to the private key anymore, and maybe more importantly, the smart signer, the smart account, has kind of can run arbitrary logic on how to do transaction validation. For example, you don't need the concrete use case is you don't need to have money in your account to pay for the transaction. It can check whether some other account can pay for you. This is like how paymasters work, which is the technical term for like gas sponsorship, not have users pay for their own gas. What 7702
which feels like magic, by the way, when you use it.
It's fantastic. It's such an upgrade. And what 7702 does through the people will talk about Pectra as well, and Pectra is the name of the Ethereum release that makes Ethereum 7702 compatible, is it basically gives those same superpowers the ability to do smart contract-based validation to EOAs directly. So you no longer need to launch the smart account on top of it in order to have the custom validation logic. Now, there are certainly trade-offs, and there are reasons why you would use 4337 rather than 7702, but the underlying like unlock for users is that any EOA user, any old wallet user, so to speak, which is to say the majority of users in crypto today, now get to have gas sponsored for them, transaction batching, various signers for their wallets across, passkeys on different websites and so on and so forth, different recovery mechanisms.
These are things that will be built into the wallet or built into the apps or both?
That's a very good question. I think that's like the $1 million question for how account abstraction actually gets deployed out in the world. It's a very, very good question. I think these are things that'll have to run through smart contract-based systems. I suspect they'll be integrated into the wallets first. Yeah, I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I saw another tweet that you shared
And
recently
sorry,
that
just to
was
be very clear on this, Privy is itself already compatible with 7702, so you can pick up 7702 today, get it off your shelf. There are a number of great companies working on it that we work with, where we make the integration very easy. And what we're working on is making it that the application developer doesn't need to do that integration themselves, to your question, but specifically we have it working out of the box for the Privy wallet so that it just works. And that's the piece that we're taking.
cool. So yeah, I saw another tweet that you shared recently, sort of about the landscape, the current landscape of building in crypto, that I thought was interesting. It was from Austin Maraza, and he talked about how there's a return to fundamentals being the wrong narrative. That the real story is that we're bifurcating as an industry between sort of speculation-driven and stablecoin-driven businesses. Can you speak to that a little bit? I thought that was interesting.
I think it's a very good observation. My favorite piece of internet content, which is kind of weird, is this tweet from Ilmoy. Ilmoy is one of the co-founders of Tensor, which is a very large
Right,
marketplace, and they
yeah.
build a lot of product that are pretty incredible in Solana, and we're very lucky to work with them. He sort of talks about the stablecoin acquisition got me thinking. Stablecoin here being Bridge. There's two ways to win in crypto. You build something as far from compliance as possible. You build something where compliance is the product. Everything in between, he says, is a ticket to the slaughterhouse. I think there's a lot of nuance to this, and it deserves like conversation. I think, frankly, I hope that we remain in a place where there is that tight tension, because I think a lot of value exists on both ends of the spectrum. But I think you see this today with the adoption of fintechs around stablecoins. You see a lot of embracing of a different type of crypto that is farther away from the, call it, crypto libertarian ethic that birthed the space. I think
just look at the first bipartisan bill to pass Congress, right?
But I think one without the other would be such a cry and shame, because a lot of the promise of the space comes from trying to do things in a new way and not just find better ways of doing the old things. But you also need it to be broadly useful and consequential to everyday users in order for the space to work. So I hope we continue to push on both fronts. And frankly, I'm pretty optimistic. We're seeing a lot of activity on both sides of the market in a way that makes me very, very optimistic for where we're going.
And speculation, we say this often on this podcast, is a bit of a superpower. I think that's a quote directly from Jacob at Zora, but I think it's something we do see, is that it, we like to demonize it sometimes, but it is, humans love to speculate on things, and it does bring new people into the space. And I noticed that, like, I'm often asking people on this pod how they got into crypto, and I realized, like, going back through 35 episodes, like, the majority of people gave some sort of a speculative answer. You would be in the minority of people who came into the space literally for the tech. Most people gave some sort of, I came because of this NFT, or I got into it because of Top Shots, or I minted crypto kitties. Like, these are the common answers you get. So there is that, like, speculative draw that brings, not just users, but also builders into the space.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think this is where you come in through it, but you stay because of the utility. Both have to be there. There is utility to speculation, but there needs to be a balance. And you see it in, like, too much of anything is not a good thing. And so that's the balance that we need to find. And I find it very exciting that we're seeing broad development now on both ends of the spectrum, which I think will get us to the right balance.
I love it.
There will be balance in the force, so to speak.
That's right. What's your vision for 2025? What's your sort of big goals for Privy in this year?
We have a lot to do. Frankly, this is as busy as I think we've been in terms of the amount of customers that we're working with, the ways in which we have to build, the ways in which our product is getting pushed. So I think we just are going to stake out very, very close to the customers that we serve, and keep putting one foot in front of the other. But the team is growing quite a bit. I'll plug that we are hiring very aggressively. And what
are you hiring for? Who are you looking for?
A lot of different folks, a lot on engineering still, very much. So if we scoop quite senior, but if you're thinking about staff engineering on infra SRE, on back end, front end security, we have a lot of work to do and some very exciting stuff we're working on.
Awesome. Do you have 5 more minutes to do a quick sort of firing squad line of questions to sort of get to know you a bit better?
Yes.
Right, let's do it. So let's find out. Let's learn a little bit more about Henri. What is your favorite cuisine? You had to pick only one cuisine to have for the rest of your life.
Be remiss not to say French.
I mean, French cuisine is pretty amazing. I think we might have to disqualify French cuisine though, because that's home cooked meals for you. So what other than French?
Well, rest of your life, there's a cuisine. There are cuisines I would rather have on a one-time basis, but like day in day out, uh,
Interesting.
I would say like Italian or Japanese, probably Italian if not French.
Italian's pretty hard to beat. Yeah.
Except
All
they
right.
don't know how to make bread for shit.
That's like the most French thing someone could say about Italians. Amazing. We make better bread. Musical preference, if you had to choose one concert to go to, not for the rest of your life, just one to go to, you're most excited about.
It's a weird thing to say. I really like classical music concerts.
Okay.
Somehow they put me to sleep invariably. And like, but it's like a deep, deep sleep, and I come out of it feeling extraordinarily relaxed. If I could like snap my fingers and be at any concert,
Yeah.
I think having seen Daft Punk live would be amazing, and
Oh,
that is
that would
a
be
great
cool.
regret.
I don't know if I would ever go to like a classical music show or whatever you would call it, but I've really enjoyed like some non-classical musicians when they do shows with like the Philharmonic or whatnot. That's really cool. Like when they're right there in the pit. Do you know Tim Minchin? That's kind of like a not many people know him, but he's a comedic singer from Australia, but his amazing voice. He's done Broadway, and he has a concert series where he does like some of his famous songs with the Philharmonic, and it's just
I
incredible.
love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
That sounds awesome.
All right, leisure activities. What's your favorite hobbies outside of work?
I have two kids. I'm sad to say I don't have a hobby anymore.
I
Uh,
That's real. I have two kids too, under two, so I feel you on that.
so if I projecting back to if not better times, at least at least less
Oh,
busy
careful.
times.
They'll
Um,
watch this in 10 years, so be careful.
I'm the I'd say actually going to movies. Watching movies, going to movies is probably the thing I enjoy doing the most.
I love going to the movies too. I like going by myself too. Not that I have time for it anymore, but I used to love going to the movies by myself, which some people think is weird, but like, I don't
That's
know.
the best.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Recent reads. Have you had a chance to read any books recently? And if so, which one?
I read the Stripe Press book Boom that I thought was very good about market bubbles.
Oh
Uh,
shoot. Yeah. I heard the author of that on Bankless and I was put it on my list to read. I thought that was really cool.
Very interesting. And then I read I'm at like sort of I finished the three body problem, first of three, after years and years of people telling me I should read it.
Cool. Yeah, Boom kind of goes back to what we were just talking about with the speculative power of the power of speculation, where it's like he basically argues that you have to have sort of the big .com boom to like drive, societies forward essentially. Anyway,
Indeed.
thanks for reminding me. I got to put that back on my reading list. What is your favorite tech gadget? I mean, obviously, maybe don't say phone because we all, we couldn't survive without our phones. But what's your one gadget that you have that you really love?
It's a good question. There's a device. The word gadget comes to mind here. Trying to think if there's anything else. So there are probably two things. There's a device called the Flipper Zero, which is basically a software-defined radio of sorts that can read signals and play them back. And so it's a lot of fun. Like if you have key cards, if you have anything, you can use it to basically record various types of signals and then use it. And so I've enjoyed playing with that quite a bit.
That's like a bit of a hacker toy, isn't it? Like, don't people
Yeah, it
use
is.
them to?
Uh,
Can't use them to break into cars and stuff, or is that
I've
something
heard
different?
that you could. I've never tried it myself.
No, yeah, not legal advice.
If The other one is there's a thing called a Novo, which is a sous vide cooker. This is like super geeky,
Hmm.
but it's been a lot of fun to like play with. I'm still unconvinced that this is a real cooking method, but it's been a great gadget.
Is it not a French cooking method? Did they
I
not
think I
invent it?
mean it must be if it's called sous vide, but
That's
yeah.
Yeah, I've been served sous vide steak before. It was quite good, but I haven't experimented it with. I don't know. I think I'm still a cast iron pan in the oven kind of guy when it comes to steak.
Makes sense.
All right, travel destinations. What's the most amazing travel destination you've been to?
Ethiopia would be the place. I lived in Kenya for part of 2018, um, and got to travel a lot. Ethiopia is just an incredible place. Nature is amazing, the culture is amazing, and so it's like a place where you're not picking what you go for. Literally at every turn, it's very diverse in terms of what you get to see, the sights, the people. The food is, I think, quite good. And so that's probably been the most interesting place I've been in my life.
Plus, it's literally back to our roots, right? You can't get any more back to our roots than that. My wife is Ethiopian, actually, and I haven't
Really?
been. I haven't been, and she hasn't been since we've known each other. But it's definitely on our list to take the kids when they're a bit earlier. She's been with her family before. I've seen pictures. She was born there and then came to Canada from a young age. But yeah, I've seen some of the pictures. It's pretty crazy. Did you the city that her family is from is Harar? I don't know if you went there.
I did not. This is where they have hyenas. You can feed
That's
hyenas.
right. I was going to ask you about that. You didn't do that?
I've not. I think it's where. So there's a French poet called Arthur Rimbaud.
Okay.
I will be murdered by the French for having said it this way. And I think he died there. He became an arms dealer later in his life and died in his 30s.
Weird twist.
In Ethiopia. But no, we didn't go there. When we went, there were a few like French embassy advisories against travel to some parts of Ethiopia. And that was one of them, and there was another, and we ended up going to the other, which was it's called Danakil, and it is, I think, one of the lowest points on Earth, meaning you're 100 meters below sea level. And so you've got very interesting like geological activity and sort of volcanic activity. You've got like sulfur and sort of pools of sulfurized water. It's like a beautiful place. It looks like Mars.
You're just getting too close to the mantle, to
the crust.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, definitely on my list to go. So, what about inspirational figures? Who's someone that you've always looked up to?
Oh man, I always looked up to is a tough one. This is a controversial one, and I don't know that it should be. So I'm gonna just move with it. But Paul Graham, I feel, is like the least original answer. But I find him to be extraordinarily interesting as a Twitter follow. And I met him once when I was in YC, and we did what was called at the time vertebrae office hours. So it was like get your pitch together, and you have 15 minutes in this case with Paul Graham to talk about your idea. He'll listen, and then he'll kind of tell you, okay, these are the points I'd hit. This is how you structure the pitch, and like it was an amazing experience. Just because you were like watching the master work. This is somebody who must have been pitched like thousands and thousands of times, and his brain is wired for an input to output that's extremely effective. And you're like, we came out of that and we're like, man, this is such a great business that we're building because we'd heard about it through his voice. But so that was the one time I've met him. But I think he always has very original, like, non-obvious kind of first principle takes on Twitter, and I find original thinking, people where you don't actually know what side of any issue they'll come out on because it seems like they're actually kind of baking their opinions fresh every time, is something very exciting to me. So he might be the person that comes to mind.
Yeah, I love that too, and it's very rare, but I've definitely had it before on this podcast where I've had someone on and like I asked them a question, they're like, it was Jacob from Zora, and he's like, what's the non-consensus take on that or something? He said to himself as he was trying to think of his answer. And I just thought that's such a marker of like someone who really does try to think, outside the norm or just to be a little bit different than just regurgitating what you hear on crypto Twitter. Let's get a productivity hack from you. You're the CEO of a fast-moving company. I'm sure you have to think every day about getting the most done. What's your best productivity hack?
Sleep. I think
if you can. We have 2 kids too, though, so you must have have some issues with that.
I've experienced the reverse, and basically, I know how hard sleep deprivation hurts. Yeah. So I think sleep is the first, and I think the second is kind of like actually deciding what not to do. Like you can easily get into a trap where you feel, oh man, I have like so much to do. If you actually take a step back and you think to yourself, 1, should I be the one doing this? 2, how bad would it be if this didn't get done? 3, when do I actually need to do it by? You end up figuring out that you've put a lot of completely false constraints on your own schedule. So I arguably am pretty god-awful at this, but I think figuring out what not to do is probably the other productivity hack.
I love that one. I'm going to use that one. Last question, alternate career path. If you weren't doing what you are doing now, what do you think you'd be doing?
It's a great question. I would love to work in movies. It's a dying industry, maybe. So I've saved myself. It's a complex industry, but I still find that it's such a magical thing. So that would certainly be one that I would dream of working in. I grew up, this is a very non-consensus view. I grew up wanting to be a lawyer and investment banker. So, dream big.
Not a fireman?
So that's probably what I would be doing.
Very cool. Well, let's bring it back around to Privy here at the end, and just if people are watching this and they've been interested in what you've been talking about and what you're building, where can they find out more about Privy and use it?
Yeah, please go to privy.io. Our blog has a lot of content that all two of our readers really appreciate, so check it out. And
It'll be four. It'll be four for sure after this.
well, I saw you on the analytics. Thank you for stopping by. And then you can follow us on Farcaster at Privy and on Twitter at Privy_IO.
I appreciate you taking the time. It's been great to get to know you. Take care. We'll see you on chain.